When I retired, I thought I was trading deadlines and neckties for birdsong and barbecues. I imagined peaceful mornings with a cup of black coffee, maybe some jazz in the background, and absolutely no one breathing down my neck. So when I found a house in a quiet suburban community, I thought I'd struck gold. Cute picket fences, kids riding bikes, and lawns so perfect you'd think the grass was hand-stitched by angels. The listing said tight-knit neighborhood, which I naively interpreted as friendly. Turns out, it was more like fascist regime with better landscaping. Enter Karen. Yes, that's actually her name. I wish I were making that up, but the universe has a brutal sense of humor. Karen was the self-appointed dictator of our HOA. Clipboard in hand like a sheriff in a dusty old western. Except instead of bandits, she hunted rogue recycling bins and mailboxes that were 0.2 degrees off angle. Her hair was always in a tight, aggressive bun, like it was planning an insurrection of its own, and her voice had the unique ability to simultaneously pierce your soul and suck the joy out of any sentence. At first, I tried to play nice. Smile, nod, keep the lawn trimmed and the garbage cans tucked away like they were in the witness protection program. I figured, hey, she's annoying, but tolerable. I've worked with worse. That optimism lasted about 4 days. First, it was a passive-aggressive note about my welcome mat. Too colorful, apparently. Distracts from the neighborhood aesthetic. Next came a warning for having unauthorized garden gnomes. I had one. Just one. His name was Greg, and he wasn't hurting anybody. Then she complained about the angle of my porch light. Said it was creating shadow zones inconsistent with community harmony. I wish I were exaggerating. I really do. But despite her pettiness, I kept my cool. Mostly because arguing with Karen is like arguing with a smoke alarm. Loud, pointless, and you just end up more annoyed than when you started. Plus, I had bigger plans. See, I used to be an engineer. Nothing fancy, just decades of tinkering, building, and making systems work. So when I finally had time on my hands, I decided to go full mad scientist, starting with solar panels. It was part hobby, part middle finger to the power company, and maybe just a little bit of a flex. I spent weeks designing and assembling the system myself. Got the permits, did the math, double-checked the grounding. It was beautiful, efficient, quiet. Everything Karen wasn't. And she hated it. I caught her multiple times just standing at the edge of my yard, arms crossed, staring at the panels like they'd insulted her cat. She never said anything directly at first, just loud enough for me to hear as she walked by. Some people think they're above community standards, or hope that roof doesn't cave in under the weight of all that scrap metal. But I ignored her, just kept working. And when the system finally went live, humming along quietly, converting sunshine into glorious, HOA-defying energy, I let myself have a private little celebration. Me, a cold beer, and the knowledge that I had power that didn't depend on the grid or Karen's approval. Then came the blackout. No warning. Just a boom in the distance, a flicker, and suddenly the entire neighborhood was plunged into 1990. No AC, no fridges, no Wi-Fi. I peeked outside and saw my neighbors stumbling into their yards like confused cave people. Except me, of course. My lights were still on. My fridge hummed merrily. And my Wi-Fi? Stronger than ever. It didn't take long. By that evening, my porch looked like an Apple store on launch day. People queued up with phones, power banks, even a small CPAP machine. I didn't mind. I'd built the system to be efficient, and I had more than enough juice to share, as long as people were patient. And they were. Everyone waited their turn. Grateful, polite, even bringing snacks and drinks. It was almost wholesome. Except for one person. Guess. Karen showed up like she was expecting a red carpet and a drum roll. She marched right past the line, past Mrs. Diaz, who'd been waiting over an hour with her oxygen unit, past the Nelson kids who were sharing a charger between 3 Nintendo Switches, and planted herself at the front of the porch. "I need to charge my phone," she announced. "No problem," I said. "You'll just need to wait your turn like everyone else." She blinked, like I'd just asked her to clean a public toilet with a toothbrush. "I'm the HOA president. And I'm the guy with electricity." Murmurs ran through the crowd. Someone even laughed. Karen turned to them like a schoolteacher catching kids chewing gum. "This is an emergency," she hissed. "Sure is," I replied. "That's why we've got a system." She glared, huffed, muttered something about ungrateful peasants, and stormed off. I figured that would be the end of it. But Karen wasn't done. Oh no. She came back. Just not during visiting hours. It was sometime around 2:43 a.m. when my security system pinged me awake. Now, I'm not the paranoid type. Okay, maybe a little, but when you've spent your career troubleshooting complex systems, you don't install solar panels without also wiring in a few fail-safes. Motion detectors, infrared cameras, a few little surprises, just in case someone got too curious after hours. And thank God I did. I rubbed the sleep from my eyes and pulled up the live feed on my tablet. At first, I didn't believe what I was seeing. There she was, Karen, in a full black hoodie and sneakers, creeping across my backyard like a raccoon with a vendetta. And in her hands, bolt cutters. You heard that right. The woman who once filed a formal complaint about someone using the wrong shade of mulch was now attempting literal sabotage under cover of darkness. I watched as she tiptoed up to my distribution box, her face scrunched in concentration like she was defusing a bomb, or trying to remember if almond milk expires. The second she raised the bolt cutters and opened them wide, my security system kicked into high gear. Flash. The strobe went off like a paparazzi ambush. Karen's eyes went wide, deer in headlights wide, just as the camera captured the most glorious snapshot I've ever seen. I'm talking art gallery worthy. A perfect still of her face frozen in terror and confusion, mouth halfway open like she was about to say, "Oh show." Siren. The alarm howled to life, shrill, angry, and designed to make even squirrels reconsider their life choices. Karen screamed, dropped the bolt cutters like they were on fire, and bolted, ironic, I know, back toward her house. My cameras tracked her the whole way, right up until she dove through her back door like she was sliding into home base. Now, you'd think I would have been angry, but honestly, I was just impressed. It takes a special kind of ego to try and sabotage solar panels during a blackout, all because your Royal Highness didn't want to wait in line. That's next-level entitlement. So I did what any reasonable man would do. I called the cops. By the time the patrol car pulled up, sirens off, lights gently spinning, a small crowd had already gathered. It was amazing how fast word spreads when you're the only house with a working group chat. Neighbors in bathrobes, slippers, holding flashlights like it was some sort of midnight town hall. The officers stepped out of the car, giving my solar rig an impressed once-over. "Nice setup," one of them said, tapping the security screen mounted near my door. "You got video?" "Oh, I got everything," I said, with the sort of grin that should be illegal in 3 states. I showed them the footage. Every frame. Karen sneaking through the shadows. Karen wielding the bolt cutters like she was auditioning for a heist movie. Karen getting her mug immortalized in high res. And finally, Karen sprinting home like she was being chased by common sense. The officers chuckled. One actually whistled. "Yeah," he said. "We'll go have a little talk with her." The whole block seemed to hold its breath as they crossed the street. Karen's lights were off. Of course they were. She didn't have power, but you could see the curtains twitching. 1 knock. 2. Finally, the door cracked open. From where I stood, I could just make out her face. Messy hair, wrinkled robe, eyes wild with panic and mascara smudges. She tried the usual act, the hand to heart, the, "Oh no, what is the meaning of all this routine?" One officer raised a brow. The other just handed her a printed photo from my security system. The photo. Her face in that moment. Priceless. They didn't cuff her. Let's not get too dramatic. But they did walk her out, slow and deliberate, while the neighborhood watched in stunned silence. And then, like a damn symphony, it began. "Is it my birthday already?" I knew she'd slip eventually. "Somebody get a cake." I swear, even Greg the garden gnome looked smug. The cops nodded to me, gave a quick report about trespassing and attempted vandalism, then drove off with Karen sitting rigidly in the back seat, eyes staring straight ahead like she was trying to astral project out of the car. And the best part? The community saw everything. Not just her stunt. They saw who stood with them when the lights went out. They saw who helped, and who nearly destroyed it for everyone. The next morning, Karen was back in her house. Curtains closed. Silent. Rumor had it she got a hefty fine and possibly a court summons. But the real fallout? That came at the next HOA board meeting. Without Karen running the show, the rest of the HOA looked like toddlers left alone with a stapler. No direction, no agenda, just confused glances and nervous throat clearing. That's when I knew. It was time for a real change. When your local tyrant gets hauled off in a cop car in front of a live audience, the natural follow-up question is, now what? That question hung in the air like the smell of burned microwave popcorn as the now headless HOA board tried to conduct their first Karen-less meeting. Spoiler alert, they were lost. Imagine a group of cats trying to assemble IKEA furniture, and you'll have the general idea. I stood in the back, arms crossed, watching them fumble through agenda items with the enthusiasm of a soggy sandwich. The remaining board members, two of Karen's loyal yes-men, and a visibly overwhelmed treasurer named Linda, didn't even try to hide their confusion. Without Karen barking orders and rewriting bylaws on a whim, they realized they had no idea what they were doing. Linda glanced at me once like a kid about to throw up during a spelling bee. That was my cue. I cleared my throat and stepped forward, real casual. Since we're between fascist regimes, I said, maybe it's time we try something different. Dead silence. Then someone in the crowd chuckled. I've got a proposal, I said. We use the HOA budget to launch a community solar initiative. Build our own power systems, for our own houses, starting with those who need it most. One of the yes-men scoffed. And who's going to do that, you? No, I said. We are. Cue dramatic pause. I laid it out. We had unused HOA funds, a blackout that could last days, and a bunch of neighbors suddenly realizing that maybe HOA regulations weren't as important as keeping grandma's oxygen machine running. I knew some of them had skills, retired engineers, electricians, truck drivers, folks with connections to hardware suppliers. They just never had a reason to collaborate before. Until now. Turns out, all they needed was someone to say the words out loud. I've got the design, I continued. Scalable, modular solar units. I can teach folks to build them. I'll even host the workshop in my garage. Linda blinked. You want to turn your garage into a factory? No, Linda, I smiled. I want to turn it into a revolution. By noon the next day, my garage looked like a scene out of Iron Man, minus the snarky AI and billions in funding. Extension cords snaked across the driveway. Portable workbenches were covered in wires, drills, and energy drinks, and the neighborhood's version of the Avengers had assembled. Roger, a retired Navy electrician, was wiring up a junction box like it owed him money. Sheila from 2 streets over was sourcing panels from her brother's warehouse. The Patel twins were managing logistics, somehow coordinating deliveries with nothing but walkie-talkies and their old gaming headsets. I wasn't sure if we were building solar kits or prepping for a DIY space launch, but spirits were high. And the best part? We started delivering units that same night. We prioritized the elderly, folks with infants, and anyone with medical needs. The looks on their faces when the lights flicked back on, not from the grid, but from us, were worth more than any HOA pat on the head or phony lawn award. Word spread. Fast. Within 3 days, we had satellite factories in 3 more garages. By the end of the week, the whole block was buzzing like a hive of solar-powered bees. Kids helped strip wires. Retirees ran quality checks. One neighbor even started bringing over lunch every day for the crew, homemade lasagna and lemonade, like some kind of suburban goddess. Meanwhile, Karen? Radio silence. Curtains closed. Not a peep. The grapevine said she'd tried to file an appeal to keep her HOA presidency, but was quietly, unanimously, rejected. She still hadn't made a public appearance since the bolt cutter incident, and her driveway stayed depressingly empty of passive-aggressive notes. We didn't need her anymore. Hell, we never did. By the end of the month, the blackout was long over. But our panels stayed. We'd built out complete neighborhood coverage. Every house with a system. Backup batteries. Swappable units. Redundant cabling and load balancing. It wasn't just a temporary solution. It was better than what we had before. And then the requests started rolling in. Cousins from across town. churches, schools, people asking, "Hey, can we do what you did?" And suddenly our little garage startup was bordering on a full-fledged co-op. Someone floated the idea of going nonprofit. Another suggested applying for a state grant. But all of that, all the orders, the coverage, the camaraderie, it wasn't even the best part. The best part came one calm, sunny morning. I stepped out onto my porch with a mug of coffee, the smell of fresh-cut grass in the air, birds chirping like they'd been coached. The street shimmered with solar panels. Kids zipped by on scooters, neighbors waved as they passed, and someone down the block was playing Motown through a Bluetooth speaker powered by our panels. It was exactly what I'd hoped for when I moved here. And then I saw it. Across the street. A moving truck. Pulling into Karen's driveway. You know that feeling when everything finally clicks? When the chaos quiets, and all the pieces just fall into place. Yeah, that was me. Porch. Coffee. Peace. And then the universe, like the great comedic playwright it is, decided to put the cherry on top. Karen was moving. At first, I didn't believe it. I thought maybe she was finally upgrading her drapes, or having her marble lines professionally pressure washed for the 7th time this month. But no, the truck wasn't delivering, it was loading. 2 guys in navy polos hopped out and started hauling out boxes. Neatly labeled, color-coded boxes. Because of course they were. Even her departure had to be tyrannically organized. I stood there, watching. I wasn't gloating, not quite. Okay, maybe just a little. All right, fine, a lot. I raised my mug in a slow salute. Karen, true to her brand, didn't return the gesture. She just stood in the shadows of her doorway, arms crossed, lips pursed. For a second, I wondered if she'd try to make some dramatic final speech. Maybe a guilt trip. Maybe one last petty strike. Something like, "I hope your precious little panels explode and fry your lawn." But instead, she said nothing. Not even a flicker of acknowledgement. I imagine it must have hurt. Watching the neighborhood she once controlled with the iron fist of a bored middle manager now thriving without her. United cooperative happy. But this was Karen, after all. She wasn't going to go out without at least trying to drag someone down with her. She made her final play at the very next HOA assembly. Technically, she still had a seat on the board, pending an internal review. And technically, she had the right to speak. So she showed up. In full force. Matching blazer and skirt. Perfectly coiffed hair. Pearl necklace so tight it looked like it was trying to choke the last bit of humility out of her. Clipboard in hand, of course. Like a twisted version of a war banner. "I'd like to file a formal motion," she announced the second she stepped into the community center. "To reverse the unauthorized allocation of HOA funds to an unlicensed neighborhood enterprise." The room froze. Then slowly, like a tidal wave of side eyes and simmering restraint, the community turned toward her. Linda, bless her, now acting HOA president by default and thriving in her new role, cleared her throat. "We already voted, Karen," she said gently. "Unanimously." Karen sniffed. "Then I call for an audit." Roger, our Navy electrician with zero patience for nonsense, stood up. "Audit this," he muttered, and held up a power bill. $0. Laughter rippled through the room. Karen faltered, just for a second, then regrouped, clutching her clipboard like it was a life preserver. "You're all just unqualified. This is illegal. Dangerous. Amateur hour. Funny," I said, stepping forward. "That's what you call my panels, too." She turned to me, nostrils flaring, like a prize bull facing off with a retired dad who just wants to grill in peace. "This neighborhood is descending into anarchy. There are cables strung across fences. Solar panels on roofs without HOA architectural approval. Charging stations in public view. And yet," I said, "no one's died. No houses have exploded. And somehow, miraculously, no one's been fined for having the wrong shade of beige siding." Someone from the back shouted, "Best anarchy ever." Another voice chimed in, "We should get jackets made." Karen's face turned a shade of red usually reserved for raw beats and temper tantrums. "I will not be part of this madness." Linda smiled. "You're not." And that was it. We held the vote right there. Karen was officially removed from the board, from the presidency, and from anything resembling authority over so much as a trash schedule. And this time, she didn't storm out. She slinked. She left the building like a balloon slowly losing air, all huff and no lift. For the first time since I moved in, Karen wasn't just defeated, she was deflated. The tyrant queen, stripped of her clipboard and crown. The next morning, the moving truck returned. This time, she wasn't hiding. I watched from my porch, mug in hand, as the last few boxes were loaded in. She didn't look up once. Didn't wave goodbye. Not that anyone was expecting her to. The only thing she ever brought to the block party was judgment. And then it happened. The truck door slammed shut. The engine started. The gears shifted. And Karen, glorious Karen, rolled out of our lives. Not a single soul waved. Except me. I raised my mug, gave her the smallest, smuggest salute I could muster, and whispered, powered by sunlight and spite. Thanks for the inspiration. She didn't look. Didn't matter. She was gone. But the story didn't end there. Not really. Because now, without her constant meddling, we had real momentum. The HOA had transformed from a petty fine factory into an actual support network. We built more solar kits, streamlined production, even partnered with a local nonprofit to install systems in underfunded schools. We'd gone from being just a block with good lawns to a movement, and all because one woman couldn't handle waiting in line. Somewhere between the first successful power share and Karen's bitter exodus, our neighborhood stopped being just a bunch of matching mailboxes and HOA newsletters. It became something real. I didn't fully grasp it until that next weekend. I stepped onto my porch, same mug, same robe, same slippers that had become a neighborhood legend after the blackout bolt cutter incident, and just stood there, soaking it all in. Kids were zooming up and down the street on bikes, scooters, and one homemade electric skateboard, courtesy of the Patel twins, and a repurposed solar battery. Neighbors waved as they passed, some walking dogs, some walking toddlers, and one guy walking what I think was a cat on a leash. The smell of grilled onions drifted downwind from somewhere, and someone was blasting Marvin Gaye on a Bluetooth speaker plugged straight into a sun-charged battery pack. It was perfect. No HOA notices tucked under doors. No clipboard stalker measuring shrub height. No soul-crushing meetings about the visual aggression of plastic flamingos. Just neighbors. Working, living, helping, together. It was everything I thought I was getting when I moved here. Hell, it was better. We didn't become rebels or anarchists. We became neighbors. Real ones. The kind that helped fix each other's roofs, that shared backup batteries during storms, that laughed together over beers and soldered panels under the afternoon sun. And Karen? Well, she was just a speed bump on the way to something better. Later that evening, I stood out front, watching the neighborhood buzz as golden light dipped low behind the rows of solar panels. Every roof catching sunlight. Every house quietly humming with the power of independence, collaboration, community. Roger passed by with his dog. She's really gone, huh? Looks like it. He smirked. Can't believe we owe this whole solar thing to her meltdown. I chuckled. What can I say? Some people inspire greatness. Others just accidentally kickstart it by being terrible. He laughed. Well, if she ever comes back, we've got spotlights now. I raised my mug. Motion triggered. We clinked imaginary glasses and watched as the last of the sun dipped behind the horizon. A few porch lights clicked on, all solar, of course. And down the street, kids hollered as they chased each other around a front yard, bikes strewn across driveways like they'd been abandoned mid-laugh. Peace. Real, earned peace. And as I leaned against my porch rail, mug in hand, I thought to myself, this is what I retired for. Not just silence and birdsong, but a place where people looked out for each other, where sunshine turned into power and pettiness turned into progress. I sipped the last of my coffee, looked down the street, and smiled, because I knew, if another Karen ever did try to rise from the ashes, we'd be ready, with panels, with cameras, and maybe even with Greg the gnome watching from the front lawn, judging silently. But most importantly, with each other. Thank you for being with us. Please share in the comments where you are watching from and whether you liked everything, and see you next time.